Captain Michael Foster stood at the Lunar Observatory's main viewport, his weathered hands clasped behind his back as he watched humanity's worst nightmare materialize against the star-speckled void. The Draconian Armada emerged from hyperspace like a storm of obsidian daggers, their biomechanical vessels writhing and pulsing with an otherworldly energy that made his skin crawl. "How many?" he asked, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. Lieutenant Sarah Rodriguez's fingers danced across her holographic display. 3,722 capital ships, sir, each one larger than anything we've ever built, and they're still coming. The observatory's atmosphere grew heavy with tension as more ships appeared, their twisted forms blocking out Jupiter's majestic form. These weren't just warships. They were apex predators made of metal and malice, each one a testament to the Draconian Empire's 17 successful planetary conquests. "Patching through the global defense network now, sir," Rodriguez announced, her professional demeanor masking the fear that had to be churning inside her. The holographic display expanded, showing faces of military commands from every major nation on Earth. General Zhang from the Eastern Coalition, Marshal Petrov from the Northern Alliance, Admiral Washington from the Atlantic Federation, all of them wearing the same expression of grim determination. Then the message came. The Draconian transmission cut through all frequencies, their translation matrix converting their guttural language into every human tongue simultaneously. "Primitive species of Sol 3, we are the Draconian Armada. Your world has been chosen for integration into our empire. Your resources will be harvested. Your population will be processed. Resistance has proven futile for 17 superior civilizations. You have 6 hours to surrender your world government representatives. Failure to comply will result in planetary sterilization." Captain Foster allowed himself a small, knowing smile. "Send our response, Lieutenant." Rodriguez looked up, surprised. "The predetermined one, sir." "Exactly as planned." The response was simple. Silence. No desperate pleas, no promises of resistance, no declarations of war, just the kind of silence that made the enemy nervous. Deep beneath Mount Denali, in a facility that didn't exist on any map, Dr. Amanda Sullivan watched the same scene unfold. Her team of quantum engineers worked with practiced precision, their movements choreographed through years of preparation for this exact moment. Quantum fold network at 98% synchronization. Her assistant, Dr. James Chen, reported. "All global nodes are green. The equations are holding steady." Sullivan nodded, her silver-streaked hair catching the blue light of the quantum core. "They really think we're primitive," she mused, watching the Draconian ships position themselves in their infamous attack formation. All those years of keeping our real progress hidden, making them think we were just playing with chemical rockets and basic A. "The best deception is the one they write themselves," Chen quoted from their training. Above them, the Draconians interpreted Earth's silence as paralysis, just as expected. Their ships began to move with predatory grace, spreading out in a pattern that had brought death to countless worlds. Sullivan placed her hand on the quantum core's activation panel. Everything had led to this moment. The Philadelphia experiment, the decades of secret development, the carefully maintained illusion of a divided Earth. Humanity had known this day would come, and they had spent generations preparing for it. "Initialize Project Quantum Fold," she commanded, her voice steady. "Let's show our visitors why they should have done better research before threatening Earth." As the quantum core hummed to life, Sullivan thought about all the civilizations that had fallen to the Draconians. This time would be different. This time, the predators had unwittingly walked into the perfect trap. The game was about to begin, and Earth was holding all the cards that the enemy didn't even know existed. Admiral Kithrick stood before the holographic display of Earth's solar system, his scaled hide reflecting the blue light of tactical readouts. The primitive planet below had failed to respond to their ultimatum. An unusual response, but not unprecedented. Some species simply froze in terror when faced with superior forces. "Launch the Shadow Lance formation," he commanded, his secondary hearts beating with the familiar rhythm of impending victory. "Show them why we remain undefeated." The massive Draconian fleet moved with practiced grace, their biomechanical ships forming the deadly pattern that had broken planetary defenses across 3 spiral arms of the galaxy. Each vessel knew its place. Each crew understood their role in this dance of destruction. From the Quantum Fold facility beneath Mount Denali, Dr. Amanda Sullivan watched the enemy formation take shape. "They're using their standard opening gambit," she noted, her fingers dancing across the quantum core's controls. "Just like the simulations predicted." Dr. James Chen nodded, his eyes fixed on the energy readings. "All quantum nodes are in perfect sync. The network is ready." The first wave of Draconian ships descended toward Earth's atmosphere, their weapons charging with enough power to level cities. Admiral Kithrix allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. This would be his 18th successful conquest. Then something impossible happened. The leading edge of the Shadow Lance, a destroyer-class vessel named Eternal Victory, simply vanished. No explosion, no debris, no distress signal. One moment it existed, the next it was gone, as if it had never been there at all. "Sensor malfunction," Kithrix barked, but before he could order a diagnostic, 3 more ships disappeared in the same manner. In the Denali facility, Sullivan's team worked with precise coordination. "Quantum Fold sequence alpha complete," Chen reported. "First 4 target vessels successfully displaced. All crews remain intact in their designated parallel dimensions." Sullivan permitted herself a small smile. "Commence sequence beta. Let's show them what happens when they threaten a species that's mastered quantum engineering." The Draconian command deck erupted into chaos as more ships began to vanish. Their sensors detected no energy weapons, no conventional explosions, not even the exotic particle traces of known cloaking technology. It was as if sections of their perfect formation were being surgically removed from reality itself. "Impossible," Kithrix whispered, his scales darkening with rage and fear. "No species has this level of technology. We would have known." "Sir," his second-in-command called out, "we're detecting some kind of spatial distortion, but it's like nothing in our database. It's as if space itself is being folded around our ships." Back on Earth, Captain Foster watched from the lunar observatory as the mighty Draconian fleet began to break formation. "Status report," he commanded. Lieutenant Rodriguez could barely contain her excitement. 27 capital ships successfully removed, sir. Dr. Sullivan reports all crews are alive, but permanently displaced to separate parallel dimensions. The enemy fleet is showing signs of tactical confusion. Foster nodded. Humanity had spent centuries preparing for this moment, developing a defense that didn't just destroy their enemies, but removed them from this reality entirely. It was the ultimate expression of human ingenuity, a weapon that wasn't a weapon at all. In the quantum facility, Sullivan initiated the next phase. Begin wide-scale displacement. Target their support ships first. Let's see how their fleet functions without logistics. The quantum core pulsed with brilliant blue energy as more ships began to vanish. Each one was carefully placed in its own parallel universe, their crews unharmed, but forever separated from their home reality. Admiral Kithrix watched in horror as his perfect formation crumbled. For the first time in his long career of conquest, he felt something he had never expected to experience while facing a primitive species. Fear. The battle for Earth had begun, and it was nothing like the previous 17 conquests. This time, the predators had become the prey. Philadelphia Naval Shipyard, October 28, 1943. The rain fell in sheets as Dr. Robert Matthews stared at the empty dock where the U.S. Eldridge had been moments before. His hand trembled as he wrote in his journal, documenting what would become the most carefully guarded secret in human history. The ship didn't just turn invisible, he wrote. It slipped between the layers of reality itself. God help us, we found something far more significant than we ever imagined. Present day, Mount Denali Facility. Dr. Amanda Sullivan held Matthew's original journal, its pages yellow with age, as she monitored the ongoing defense against the Draconian fleet. The Philadelphia experiment was never a failure, she explained to her team during the brief respite between quantum fold operations. It was too successful. Dr. James Chen looked up from his console, where another Draconian vessel had just been successfully displaced. How did they keep it hidden for so long? Sullivan smiled, running her fingers over the ancient journal's cover. By creating the greatest misdirection in human history. The Cold War, the space race, the arms race, all carefully orchestrated theater. The facility's main screen showed historical footage. The Berlin Wall's construction, the moon landing, the fall of the Soviet Union. Each event had been planned, a global performance to hide the truth that the world's greatest minds had been working together since 1943. When the Eldridge reappeared, Sullivan continued, it brought back data that changed everything. We learned that space wasn't just three-dimensional. It was like a book with infinite pages, each one a separate reality. And we had just discovered how to turn those pages. In low Earth orbit, another Draconian ship vanished, its matter perfectly transferred to a parallel universe. Admiral Kethrix's frantic communications echoed through the facility. What sorcery is this? What have you done with our warriors? They're safe, Sullivan murmured, though the Admiral couldn't hear her. Every ship, every crew member, all alive and well, just elsewhere. That was Matthew's greatest insight. Why destroy when you could simply relocate? The facility's archives flashed through more historical footage. Secret meetings between supposedly hostile nations, underground research facilities built during fake military exercises, quantum physics breakthroughs disguised as failed experiments. The hardest part, Chen added, was keeping our progress hidden from the stars, making them think we were just playing with chemical rockets and basic computers. Sullivan nodded, setting down the journal. Every space launch failure was deliberate. Every public scientific achievement was carefully chosen to look primitive. We knew they were watching. The Draconians, the other species. We had to appear harmless. On their screens, the Draconian fleet was in disarray. Ships attempting to retreat found themselves displaced to other realities. Those trying to attack simply vanished mid-strike. Humanity's greatest secret was now their greatest weapon. Dr. Matthews would be proud, Chen said, watching another squadron disappear. His theory about non-destructive defense, it actually worked. Sullivan walked to the quantum core, its smooth surface humming with power that the Philadelphia team could only have dreamed about. That's what makes us different from the Draconians. They spent centuries perfecting ways to destroy. We spent that time learning how to remove threats without taking lives. The core pulsed as it tracked another target. In the decades since the Eldridge, humanity had built a global network of quantum fold generators, hidden in plain sight, as power plants, research stations, and weather monitoring facilities. Send the signal, Sullivan commanded. It's time for Phase 3. Around the world, hidden facilities powered up. The greatest secret in human history was finally revealing itself, not with a bang, but with the subtle ripple of space folding in on itself. In his command ship, Admiral Kethrix watched in horror, as reality itself seemed to turn against his fleet. The primitives had deceived them all. Earth wasn't defenseless. It had simply been waiting for the right moment to show its true power. Admiral Kethrix's talons drew blood from his own scaled palm as he clenched his fist. Deploy the world breakers, he commanded, his voice carrying the weight of desperate pride. All of them. The command deck fell silent. In 17 conquests, they had never needed to use more than one world breaker. Each vessel was a monument to Draconian might, carrying weapons designed to crack planets like eggs. "All 6, my lord," his second-in-command asked, scales paling. "All 6. From the Quantum Fold facility, Dr. Amanda Sullivan watched as massive ships emerged from the Draconian fleet's core. Each world breaker was 20 kilometers long, their hulls covered in crystalline formations that pulsed with devastating energy. "They're preparing to fire." Lieutenant Rodriguez's voice crackled through the comm. "Energy readings are off the charts." Sullivan's fingers danced across the quantum core's controls. Just as the simulations predicted. "Begin Protocol Omega. Channel all power to the Fold network." The world breakers moved into position, their crystal arrays aligning with Earth's major population centers. Energy built up in waves, distorting the very space around their weapons. "For the glory of the Empire," Thrix roared. "Fire." 6 beams of pure destruction lanced toward Earth, each capable of shattering a continent. The Draconian crews watched with savage satisfaction, expecting to see oceans boil and continents crack. Instead, the beams vanished just meters from Earth's atmosphere. In the Denali facility, Dr. James Chen called out readings. "Quantum fold successful. All 6 beams redirected to empty parallel dimensions. No leakage, no collateral damage." Sullivan allowed herself a moment of pride. The quantum fold network wasn't just working. It was performing beyond their highest expectations. Each world breaker beam had been caught and redirected, like a river being divided into 6 separate streams, each flowing into its own reality. "Impossible." Thrix slammed his fist into his command console. "Nothing can stop a world breaker. Nothing." "Sir," his weapons officer called out, "they're not stopping the beams. They're moving them somewhere else. The energy doesn't dissipate, it just disappears." In the lunar observatory, Captain Foster watched the display with grim satisfaction. "Show me the target dimensions," he ordered. Lieutenant Rodriguez brought up a series of readings. Each beam was redirected to an uninhabited parallel Earth, sir. Dr. Sullivan's team selected realities where our planet never formed. The beams are expending their energy harmlessly into empty space. The world breakers fired again and again, their crews growing more desperate with each failed attack. Each time, the quantum fold network caught their beams and redirected them, like a master swordsman deflecting wild strikes. "They still don't understand," Sullivan mused, watching the Draconian fleet's frantic movements. "They think this is about firepower, about weapons. They don't realize we've changed the rules of combat itself." Chen nodded, his hand steady on the controls. "They're fighting with swords in a world where we've learned to control the very ground they stand on." The world breakers' attacks grew more erratic, their precision failing as frustration overtook training. Several beams went wide, missing Earth entirely. Others crossed paths, creating dangerous energy reactions that threatened their own ships. "Now," Sullivan commanded, "while they're disorganized, begin Phase 4. Around the world, hidden quantum fold generators increased power. The network hummed with energy as it prepared for its most ambitious operation yet. "Remember," Sullivan addressed her team, "precision over speed. Each ship must be placed in its own designated reality. We're not here to destroy them. We're here to show the galaxy a better way." Above them, the world breakers continued their futile assault, their mighty weapons useless against an enemy that had mastered the space between spaces. The Draconians had brought their ultimate weapons to Earth, only to learn that sometimes the greatest power lies not in what you can destroy, but in what you can move. Commander Vexthal led his elite strike team through the frozen corridors of the Antarctic Research Station. Their stealth systems had finally found a weak point in Earth's defenses, or so they thought. Life signs ahead. His scout reported, advanced sensors prodding the ice-encased facility. Multiple humans, but no weapons signatures. No energy readings consistent with their primitive technology. The strike team moved like living shadows, their scaled forms blending with the darkness. They expected resistance, desperate humans fighting with their crude projectile weapons. Instead, they found only unlocked doors and lit pathways. In the facility's main chamber, Dr. Marcus Reynolds sat calmly at his desk, reading through old research notes. He didn't look up when the Draconians burst in, their weapons trained on his head. "You're late," he said simply, still not looking up. "We expected you 17 minutes ago." Vexthal's secondary heart skipped a beat. Something was wrong. This wasn't how primitives behaved when faced with superior forces. "The Antarctic node is secure," Reynolds spoke into his communication device, ignoring the weapons pointed at him. "Beginning Educational Protocol 7. "What trickery is this?" Vexthal demanded, his warriors' instincts screaming that they had walked into a trap. Reynolds finally looked up, his eyes showing not fear, but something worse. Pity. "No trickery. Just the truth you've been too proud to see." He gestured to the facility's walls, which suddenly became transparent, revealing vast arrays of technology that hummed with quiet power. "Impossible," one of the strike team warriors whispered. "These energy signatures. They're beyond anything in the Imperial database." "Of course they are," Reynolds said, standing slowly. "We've been developing them since before your empire found its first interstellar engine." He walked to a holographic display, waving his hand through it to activate a sequence of images. The Draconians watched in stunned silence as the display showed their missing ships, each one intact, but existing in completely separate realities. Their crews were alive, unharmed, but forever separated from their home dimension. "We call it the quantum fold," Reynolds explained, his voice taking on a professor's tone. "We don't destroy your ships. We simply relocate them, each to its own parallel universe, selected specifically to support life, but prevent any return to this reality." Vexthal's scales darkened with rage and fear. "You expect us to believe that primitives who haven't even colonized their own moon have mastered interdimensional travel?" Reynolds laughed softly. "That's the beauty of it. We never needed to colonize the moon. We were too busy learning to fold space itself." He touched another control, and the room filled with historical images. "Everything you think you know about Earth's development was a carefully constructed deception." The strike team watched as decades of human history unfolded before them. Not the public version they had studied, but the truth. Secret facilities, hidden breakthroughs, global cooperation disguised as political conflict. "Your entire assessment of Earth was based on what we wanted you to see," Reynolds continued. "Those primitive rockets, decoys, our failed space programs, theatrical productions. We knew you were watching, so we gave you a show." A sudden tremor shook the facility as another world breaker beam was redirected to a parallel dimension. Reynolds didn't even flinch. "Your weapons are impressive," he acknowledged, "but they're still just tools of destruction. We chose a different path. Why destroy when you can simply relocate the problem?" Vexthal's weapon wavered. For the first time in his career, he faced an enemy that had not only anticipated their every move, but had shaped their entire understanding of what they were fighting. "Your admiral should be receiving our full technical documentation now," Reynolds said, checking his watch. "I suggest you contact him. He'll have some important decisions to make about the future of this conflict." The truth had finally emerged. Earth wasn't just fighting back. It was revealing itself as something the Draconian Empire had never encountered before. A civilization that had mastered the art of victory without destruction. Admiral Kithrick stared at the technical documents his strike team had transmitted, his claws digging deep grooves into his command chair. The truth about Earth's capabilities shattered everything He thought he knew about warfare. "They've been playing us like prey animals," he snarled, his scales shifting to the deep purple of rage. "But every system has its breaking point. Launch Operation Sundering." Across the remaining Draconian fleet, crews scrambled to their stations. The Admiral had prepared this desperate strategy after their 7th ship vanished. A simultaneous attack on every major population center on Earth. "All remaining ships, split into strike groups," he commanded. "Target their ground facilities. If we can't beat their technology, we'll overwhelm their network with sheer numbers." In the Mount Denali facility, Dr. Amanda Sullivan watched the Draconian fleet divide into smaller groups. "They're finally making their desperation play," she noted, her fingers dancing across the quantum core's controls. "Dr. William Barnes, are you seeing this?" Indeed, Barnes' voice came through the comm, his London facility already tracking multiple incoming vessels. "They think they can overwhelm us by attacking everything at once. Should we show them why that's a mistake?" Sullivan smiled. "Begin the Revelation Protocol. It's time to stop hiding." Across the globe, something extraordinary began to happen. As Draconian ships descended toward major cities, entire buildings simply phased out of reality. The Sydney Opera House vanished moments before a plasma beam struck its location. The Empire State Building shifted between dimensions, making the attack pass through empty space. "Impossible!" Thrix roared as his tactical display showed more and more structures disappearing and reappearing. "Their quantum network can't protect every building." "That's where you're wrong, Admiral." Sullivan's voice cut through his communication system. "Those buildings have always been part of the network. Every major structure we've built in the last 50 years has quantum fold technology integrated into its foundation." To demonstrate her point, the entire city of Tokyo shifted slightly out of phase, causing a barrage of draconian weapons to pass harmlessly through the space where it had been. "You see, Admiral," she continued, "we didn't just prepare to defend Earth. We rebuilt our entire civilization around this technology. Every skyscraper, every bridge, every power plant. They're all part of the network." Barnes' voice joined the transmission. "Look at your tactical display, Admiral. Notice how your ships are perfectly arranged, almost as if." Thrix's eyes widened as he realized the truth. In their attempt to strike every major target at once, his fleet had arranged itself into a pattern that perfectly matched the quantum network's optimal configuration. "Now," Sullivan commanded. In an instant, hundreds of Draconian ships vanished simultaneously. The strain on the quantum network was immense, but the system held. Each vessel was precisely placed in its own parallel reality, their crews intact but forever separated from their fleet. "You forced our hand, Admiral," Sullivan explained, her voice almost gentle. "We didn't want to reveal all our capabilities, but you left us no choice. Every city you targeted, every building you aimed at. They're all quantum fold generators. Earth isn't just defended by our technology, it's built from it." Thrix watched as his mighty fleet was reduced to a handful of ships. The greatest armada in known space, undone not by superior firepower, but by an enemy that had turned their own strategy against them. "Your choice is simple," Barnes added. "Continue this attack and join your ships in parallel dimensions, or retreat and tell your empire the truth about Earth. We don't want war, Admiral. We never did. That's why we developed a defense that preserves life even as it removes threats." In his command chair, Admiral Kithrix, conqueror of 17 worlds, faced the most difficult decision of his career. The humans hadn't just defeated his fleet. They had rewritten the very rules of warfare itself. Dr. Amanda Sullivan stood before the quantum core, its crystalline surface reflecting the determination in her eyes. "It's time to show them everything," she announced to her team. "Initialize the temporal protocols." Dr. James Chen's hands hesitated over his controls. Are you sure? Once we reveal this capability, they need to understand why they've lost, Sullivan said. Why every strategy they tried was doomed before they began. In orbit, Admiral Kithrix was preparing his final assault when his tactical display began showing impossible data. The remaining human cities weren't just shifting in space, they were moving through time itself. What sorcery is this? He demanded, watching as Manhattan seemed to exist in multiple moments simultaneously. Not sorcery, Admiral. Dr. William Barnes' voice came through the comm. Simple physics. Did you really think we'd master space without understanding its relationship with time? Sullivan's voice joined the transmission. Every time you've attacked, every strategy you've employed, we've had centuries to prepare for it. The quantum folds don't just bridge space, they create temporal bubbles where time flows differently. To demonstrate, she gestured to her team. The Denali facility's interior shifted, revealing hundreds of temporal echoes. The same team working through countless iterations, planning for every possible draconian move. In the time it takes you to plan one attack, she explained, we've already lived through thousands of variations. Every possible strategy, every potential outcome. We've seen them all and prepared accordingly. Kithrix watched in horror as his ship's weapons fire seemed to move in slow motion, while Earth's defenses responded with impossible speed and precision. Your remaining ships are targeting our secondary defense grid, Barnes noted casually. We've had about 3 centuries of subjective time to perfect our response to that particular strategy. Would you like to see the result? Before Kithrix could respond, the defense grid didn't just avoid the attack. It seemed to react before the weapons had even fired. Each blast was met with a perfectly positioned quantum fold. Each ship's movement countered before it began. Impossible, Kithrix whispered. No species could. That's where you're wrong, Sullivan interrupted. We're not just fighting you in space, we're fighting you through time. Each quantum fold creates a pocket where we can take as long as we need to perfect our defense. What looks like split-second decisions to you are the result of years of analysis and preparation. To prove her point, she opened a channel showing the interior of one of the temporal bubbles. Inside, teams of scientists and strategists worked through complex simulations, testing and refining their responses to every possible draconian action. Your empire prides itself on military might, Barnes added. But while you were building bigger ships and stronger weapons, we were learning to step outside time itself. Every attack you launch, we've already defeated it 1,000 times in 1,000 different ways. Kithrix's secondary hearts nearly stopped as he finally understood the full scope of his defeat. His mighty armada hadn't just been outmaneuvered in space. They'd been fighting an enemy that could take endless time to plan each move, while barely a second passed in normal space. The choice is yours, Admiral, Sullivan said, her voice carrying the weight of centuries of preparation. Continue this fight against an enemy that has already lived through every possible version of it, or accept that some civilizations have evolved beyond the need for traditional warfare. In the quantum core chamber, Sullivan watched the Admiral's ship as it hung motionless against Earth's star-filled sky. She had already seen this moment play out in countless temporal iterations, but the reality of it still held a certain poetry. Humanity had not just mastered space, they had transcended the very flow of time itself. The Draconian Empire's greatest fleet had come expecting to find primitives, and instead discovered a species that had turned physics itself into the ultimate defense. 3 months after the Draconian retreat, the Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council hummed with tense energy as representatives from 100 species gathered for an unprecedented session. At the center of attention stood Dr. Amanda Sullivan, her gray hair gleaming under the chamber's crystalline lights. The humans did not just defeat our greatest fleet. Admiral Kithrix addressed the assembly, his scales now bearing the white markings of a peace envoy. They showed us a new way of thinking about space, time, and warfare itself. The assembled delegates murmured as holographic displays showed the quantum fold technology in action. Not the weapon they had expected, but something far more revolutionary. For centuries, Sullivan began, her voice carrying across the chamber, Earth maintained a careful illusion of primitive development. Not out of fear, but out of hope. Hope that when we finally revealed ourselves, it would be to offer solutions rather than threats. She gestured, and the chamber's center filled with a demonstration of the latest quantum fold application. A miniature star system appeared, its planets seamlessly connected to parallel dimensions that offered endless room for expansion. The same technology that defended Earth can reshape our understanding of living space, she explained. Why fight over limited resources when we can create sustainable access to infinite parallel worlds? Dr. William Barnes stepped forward, adding, each quantum fold can connect to a carefully selected parallel reality. Imagine colonies that exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Trade routes that cross not just space, but reality itself. The chamber erupted in excited discussion as the implications became clear. The Draconian ships that had been displaced weren't just removed from the battle. They had become unwitting pioneers of a new form of space exploration. We've already established contact with several of the displaced ships, Cathrix revealed. Each crew has discovered a pristine, uninhabited version of their home systems. Some have already begun building new colonies, freed from the resource wars that have plagued our empire. Sullivan nodded. That was always our goal, not to destroy those who attacked us, but to show them alternatives. The Philadelphia experiment didn't just give us a weapon. It gave us a tool to reshape the very nature of civilization. The quantum core's demonstration shifted, showing how cities could exist in multiple states, how trade could flow through dimensional corridors, how entire civilizations could expand without ever coming into conflict. Earth stands ready to share this technology, Sullivan announced, under proper guidance and with appropriate safeguards. We've spent centuries perfecting not just the science, but the ethics of its use. A representative from the Cygnus Collective rose. And what guarantees do we have that Earth won't use this power to dominate the galaxy? Barnes smiled. If domination were our goal, would we be here? We've had this technology for centuries. We could have conquered every world in the galaxy without firing a shot. Instead, we waited, we prepared, and we revealed ourselves only when necessary. Sullivan added, our victory over the Draconian fleet wasn't just a demonstration of power, it was a demonstration of restraint. Not a single life was lost, not a single ship destroyed. That is the true measure of advanced civilization. The chamber fell silent as the truth of her words sank in. Earth hadn't just introduced new technology. They had introduced a new philosophy of power and progress. The age of conquest is over, Cathrix declared, his voice carrying the weight of personal experience. The humans have shown us that the universe is vast beyond our greatest imaginations, and that the true path to greatness lies not in dominating space, but in learning to share it. As the council session concluded, Sullivan looked out at the assembled representatives of galactic civilization. The great deception was finally over. Humanity could step into the light, not as conquerors or victims, but as teachers, ready to show the galaxy that the greatest adventures lay not in the stars above, but in the infinite realities that existed just a quantum fold away.